All right, friends, welcome back to the Hurry Up. We had a slow down, which we all needed after last week, because first week of free agency was a little bit of a blur.
Just a little bit. I think around Saturday, I want to say 3 p.m. is when I finally came up for air and realized I'd caught my breath. I was like, okay, now we can move into the next week.
Yeah, the coffee started wearing off after a couple of days. The big news after we taped our last episode of the Hurry Up, obviously, was Rico Dowdle. I mean, to go out and get a 1,000-yard rusher, a guy who was 1,300 yards from scrimmage last year with the Cowboys, to pair with Chuba Hubbard, a 1,300-yard from scrimmage guy and a 1,000-yard rusher here, that sets up a pretty good dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, you never are going to deny having 2,000-yard rushers in your backfield, and especially because we know how much Canales likes to use these two-back sets. So you essentially will have two in the backfield at one time. Of course, people are going to ask, what does this mean for Jonathan Brooks? Jonathan Brooks has a long recovery ahead of him.
Right.
I mean, 2025, I'm getting ahead of myself. We don't really know what has in store for Jonathan Brooks. And so this kind of gives the Panthers a little bit of breathing room, and a little bit of breathing room with a great back on a very advantageous deal.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't look gift horses like this in the mouth.
1-year deal for Rico. That gives him a chance to establish himself behind a really good offensive line. And then if Jonathan Brooks is healthy again and ready to contribute in a year, he'll be ready to contribute in a year. But that's another big part of this thing. I mentioned the offensive line. Brady Christensen back on another 1-year deal gives you a 5-position starter who can plug in anywhere along that offensive line, along with Cade Mays, along with Austin Corbett. They've got their top 9 guys in snaps from last year back next year.
And that's about what you want to have going into each year. So to have all of those return is huge as well. Actually, when we talked to Rico Dowdle last week, he mentioned the offensive line being a huge selling point for wanting to come here. He's from here as well, so it's a chance to come home. But he was like, when you get a chance to run with a back like Chuba and behind an offensive line like that, you don't turn that down as a running back. So it's kind of funny, too. What we saw, a year ago as a detriment to this team is now a selling point.
Right.
And it's because they were able to find the talent at the positions they needed and then bring it all back at least for another year.
Yeah, and with all those guys coming back, the Carolina Panthers have the opportunity to go into a season with the same starting 5 on the offensive line for the first time since
I read this in a story today. I want to say
2015 and 16.
Oh, so close.
Yeah,
So
I think
close.
you were in high school then or something.
I
don't
wasn't, but
know.
we'll tell people that.
We'll go with that. Yeah, I mean, that kind of continuity is huge. And Brady and those guys all being back together gives a lot of flexibility because injuries are inevitable in the NFL. And now you've got guys who are trained up in multiple positions. So the hope is everything can kind of cruise right along no matter what happens. You want to have that versatility.
And have played with each other.
No doubt.
Which is huge.
No doubt. The other cool thing that happened last week is some of these new guys that we wrote about and talked about and were reported to be on the way last week, they're here now. And they rolled in. And it's always kind of interesting to see these people that you've talked about as abstract concepts actually be in the building. Yeah.
Real human beings, signed, sealed, and delivered. Couple of guys, I mean, they couldn't help but stand out. I mean, you talked to Bobby Brown, for one. Big guy.
Breaking news. Bobby Brown III, large human being. He's big this way and this way. And just imagine putting him next to a Derek Brown with Ashawn on the other side. It's like, okay, now there's size up front. Now there's depth up front. And that's the thing with him and Tershawn Wharton coming in. We talked about this last week. Just the ability to roll defensive linemen in waves is so huge in terms of what they want to do defensively, and it's going to help guys like Derek and Ashawn out rather than them having to beat themselves into the ground playing 750, 800, 900 snaps a year.
Another guy that rolled in here was Patrick Jones II, another big guy, not quite as big this way, but definitely tall, lengthy, big wingspan. And just when you see a guy like that in person, you go, oh, yeah, you were put here to rush a passer.
No doubt.
And that's exactly what he's going to do. Joining up with DJ Wanham again, he said that's going to make a huge difference, being able to come in and play with someone who he already knows, who he already is familiar with.
Yeah, no doubt. You can't argue with 7 sacks last year in Minnesota. Again, he and Wanham have a good partnership already. Those two know each other well. I think more than anything else, when you get through a week like that, sometimes you got to step back and just kind of remember, okay, deep breath. Re-signed 8 of your own guys. Signed 7 guys from outside. All the defensive guys we mentioned Sam Martin, brand new punter. We say happy trails to our old friend Johnny Hecker. He'll be in Tennessee next year. But Sam Martin, former Appalachian State punter, been in Buffalo the last couple of years where he barely ever had to punt.
Right.
He should be fresh for his appearance here in Carolina. But when you think about all those guys, I think sometimes you got to step back and do the numbers. And right now they've got 66 guys under contract. You add in 9 draft picks that they've got coming up in the draft in April, that's 75.
I'm glad you're doing this
When,
math.
when the offseason limit is 90 and you realize, okay, after the draft they're going to sign 10 or 12 undrafted free agents, you realize that's pretty much where they are. And you can kind of look at the numbers. We put a story on Panthers.com this morning about kind of the position by position. As you look at what's left and what's left to be done, it's easy to imagine how that impacts draft plans moving forward. And speaking of the draft, with free agency largely in the bag, we're pivoting, starting to look at the draft class coming up on our Panthers YouTube channel. If you keep an eye on that, subscribe, push all the buttons. Episode 1 is going to be going through skill position guys. We'll be there with you all throughout the spring, leading into the draft season. You're going to a pro day tomorrow. You'll be in South Carolina. It's that time of year. Free agency's largely behind us. The draft's in front. We'll have more for you on Panthers.com and the YouTube channel. Check it out.